What was his name? Dingle. It must have been him, all right, yeah. I'm dedicating this story to a friend who is here today, Tim Collins, because I wouldn't have written the story without him, because he plays a great part in it, even though his name is not mentioned. But I don't think the story would have been written only for you, Tim, and you'll see why. All right, here we go. All right, as best we can. Deniseen was, as we said, the great character, like all great characters. You're a barman, I was a barman. Great characters, great. When you meet them, you have a drink with them. Brilliant. And then you head off, and you leave the character with the barman. And then another guy comes in, has a drink with him. Great time, head off, and leave him with the barman. So you've got this character 24/7, like maybe for years and years and years. You've heard all the stories 1,000 times. Wow, God Almighty. Who'd do it? Here we go. During the summer season, Deniseen entered the bar at 10 minutes to 10. Michael, you started those times, did you?
Absolutely.
You could have a claim against you now, like for mental torture. He gave me a cursory glance and a small nod which indicated a pint of Guinness. By now the music session was in full flow and tourists clapped along to the beat of the accordion and bodhrán. Suddenly Deniseen would put his hand into his inside pocket and retrieve a mouth organ. Then during the next lull in the music, he would give an almighty blast to proclaim his arrival. Instantly, all heads turned in his direction. The game was on, and the master was at play. Then a group of tourists would wish to have a photograph taken with the local hero. This entitled Deniseen to throw his arms around one or two unsuspecting girls and asking both of them to marry him. This brought forth great mirth and howls of laughter. Then followed one of his signature lines, "Jesus Christ, Kitty, if you marry me, we'll have 10 babies and we'll live in a bahan on the side of Scrag." More laughter, more photos, more pints. Jesus Christ, the crack is mighty. Sure, if there was any better, we wouldn't stick it at all. A couple of more blasts from the mouth organ, clapping in wild excitement, and Deniseen was soon in cloud cuckoo land. Then my brother would play the national anthem, and this signaled the end of the night's proceedings. But not for our hero. Just as Fergus played the final 2 bars of the national anthem, Deniseen would accompany him with a ferocious gusto from the mouth organ. Timing is essential, and in these circumstances, Deniseen ensured that he was still playing on his own for the remaining 10 seconds. Immediately the tourist turned and forlornly listened to the final notes of the night's performance. With an exaggerated wave of the hand, he withdrew the mouth organ from his mouth and instantly proclaimed, "Agus an scóranis, Kiri de goal agus fé pointe, agus ní léon score fós in Corpig." This brought great response, especially if there was a contingent of Cork tourists in the audience. Then followed the thankless job, of course, of clearing the public house. "Come on, lads, finish up your drinks. Ihawa, Colasav, agus na Fluchagi and Laba." I rattled out these lines 1,000,000 times, but to no avail. Tourists kept taking photographs, locals chatted away, and I was totally ignored. Too often, the Gardaí parked the squad car outside the door, and now an extra effort was made in order to remove the last diehards and hangers-on. Deniseen was always the last patron to leave, and often the Gardaí got annoyed with his total indifference to the law. Furthermore, he often reminded the Gardaí that they had nothing better to do than to harass the country's law-abiding citizens. However, during a very busy August, the Gardaí's patience gave way, and we got a good dressing down. On each occasion, Deniseen and his entourage were the last to leave. After discussing the problem with my brother Fergus, I decided that drastic action was needed. The following evening, I cautioned Deniseen and warned him as to his future behaviour and that sanctions would be forthcoming if he didn't cooperate. That same evening, we were under fierce pressure to clear the bar. It was well past midnight, and the squad car was again parked outside. Again we appealed to the customers, but Deniseen was playing his mouth organ for a group of Dutch tourists and ignored us. I grabbed his drink and I poured it down the sink. His heart sank to his boots. Furthermore, I informed him that he was barred for the remainder of the story. His only reply was, "Jesus Christ, Kitty, you must be go piss up my leg." Next evening, Deniseen arrived at the appointed time and nonchalant nodded for a drink. I had my lines well rehearsed. "Unfortunately, sir, you're not being served on these premises anymore," I uttered in a stern voice. Time stood still as he stared at me with murder aforethought in his mind, and surprisingly, he walked out the back door without issuing forth a single syllable. What followed was a unique barring order. I refused to serve Deniseen by night, but my brother Fergus served him during the daytime. This state of affair continued until I left for the commencement of the new academic year. I was no sooner entering through the hollow gates of Trinity College, that's where I got schools, when Deniseen was fully reinstated in O'Flaherty's with full remission. However, I couldn't bury the hatchet. I had suffered too much grief because of his antics, and I foolishly reimposed the ban the following Christmas vacation. This situation was now bizarre. My brother didn't give a tinker's curse, and my stupid pride wouldn't allow me to surrender to Deniseen's trite arrogance. The whole situation came to a battle of wits between the college undergraduate and the wily old playboy. I was out of my depth, and there could only be one logical winner. However, my youthful folly wouldn't allow me to surrender without a battle, and so continued a war I was destined to lose. It is often said that time is a great healer. There is no doubt the fact that Deniseen was a double-edged sword. Undoubtedly, he was a right nuisance at closing time. But I couldn't deny that he was a star attraction to the tourists, and especially his loyal following from Cork. As well as being a self-appointed entertainer, he also held down a number of part-time jobs. Gardening, whitewashing, tarring, releasing congested sewers, setting rat traps, painter, decorator, sandbag filler during flood alerts. In fact, Deniseen was the first line of defense for many of the townspeople. He had a loyal customer base. He could find a home for a pup, drown a kitten, tickle a salmon, and pluck a turkey before noon. And to make matters more complicated, my mother was one of his best customers. The final episode of the struggle of wits commenced on the following St. Patrick's weekend. I arrived home from college with my classmate Kieran Bambury and threw my battered suitcase into the kitchen. There had been a severe storm and some of the slates had come undone. There was a bucket in the middle of the floor to catch the water from the drop down. My mother was in conversation with somebody up in the attic who was surveying the damage and sticking out little pieces of twigs where both light and water were coming through. Afterwards, he would climb the roof with a bucket of cement and trowel. He would identify where the twigs were and fill in the leaks. This was a temporary measure, which was to last a lifetime, or perhaps the next storm if we were lucky. I could hear Deniseen's familiar voice in the attic as he conversed with my mother. Jesus Christ, Molly, there's so much light coming through when dazzled. Don't spare, I was lamping hairs. I was a little tired after the long journey, and I checked the fridge to determine the prospect of a wholesome meal. My mother relied on others to bring home messages from the shop, and stocks were fairly low. I sprinted up to Patty Atty's butcher shop and purchased a sizable sirloin steak, which I placed in the fridge for later on. I made my mother aware of my arrival, but I immediately left on the pretense of purchasing lemons to be used for hot whiskies later that evening. On my return, I had expected Deniseen to have completed his aerial exploits and to have gone on his merry way. But lo and behold, the Lord had contrived my final humiliation. The succulent whiff of fried steak and onions had my mouth salivating in anticipation. I opened the kitchen door, and there, sitting at the top of the table, was the bold Deniseen grinding his way through my steak. Jesus Christ, Kitty, I loves the fat. Sit down there and have a bite to eat. Game, set and match to Deniseen. I immediately retreated to the bar, and after a couple of minutes my mother came out with Deniseen in close attendance. Give Deniseen £2 and serve him a couple of pints. I could have bought, but in truth, I was war weary. Deniseen scuffed down the first pint with relish. I'll have the other pint later on. Parting words, cutting all fox. There were no words exchanged. The embargo was over. He left in a hurry to catch up on his early evening rounds at the pubs in Main Street. He'd be back tonight for a triumphant return and another virtuoso performance. A leopard never changes his spots, and Deniseen relapsed to his old tricks. I just avoided him and tidied the bar. I was glad to hit the sack and listen to the rain belting out a soothing melody. When I got up in the morning, the kitchen floor was again flooded. Yeah, you guessed it, Deniseen had fixed the wrong slate.